Hi guys, James here and welcome to my second ever video on my channel, R Consoles. Now before I start this video I just want to say a big thank you to everyone who watched my previous video, my introduction to my channel video. It means a lot already knowing that I've got a few people following and viewing me. I'd also like to thank all those subscribers that I've now gained from that video. It means a lot to me again, it's a step in the right direction. I'd also like to give a special thank you to my friend Henry who supplied me with Adobe Premiere recently, so hopefully that will make my video editing skills a little bit better. Fingers crossed. Today we'll be looking at starting a new playlist that I'd like to progress with on this channel, known as Retro Rewind. Now for those who don't know what Retro Rewind is, in my introduction to the channel video I discussed that I'd like to make a playlist focused on the history of specific games consoles. Now for example, I'll be looking at the history of Sega Mega Drive, PS1, Nintendo Wii, etc. Today I thought I'd start on the PlayStation series. Now PlayStation 2 was my original games console, it was my first games console and I still have it back at home, but my OCD didn't believe it would be right to start on the PlayStation 2 when knowing full well there was a PlayStation 1 beforehand. So today I thought we'd start on this, the PlayStation 1, this bad boy. We'll be looking at the history, the software, the hardware and just the general popularity of this beast. So without further ado, let's get started. Now let's rewind all the way back to the great year of 1995. And what a time it was to be alive. In the music industry, Gangsta's Paradise was number 1, TLC's Waterfalls had been voted the best music video of the year, and the Spice Girls were running large in the charts. In the film industry, some greats had been released. Toy Story, for example, Batman and Robin, and Tom Hanks' amazing Apollo 13. Also in 1995, tech had made a massive advancement. eBay and Amazon had only just started out, and Bill Gates had released Windows 95 with Microsoft. Now let's set the scene. You've had a hard day at school collecting these weird things called pogs, and you finally got home to eat dinner in front of your cathode ray TV, and you sit down for some Friday night television, and all of a sudden, this advert comes on. Now imagine that. Imagine being at home in 1995 where you used to play your Sega Mega Drives and your Nintendo games, which are all in 8-bit or 16-bit format and all two-dimensional. And all of a sudden, a new company out of nowhere named Sony releases a console that plays 32-bit, 3-dimensional polygon games. You'd go crazy for it. And I think the world did go crazy for it in the end. But let's just go back a little bit further because I haven't been quite honest with you. Now, the PS1 was released in 1995 in Europe, however it was released in 1994 in Japan. Now the PS1 was very successful in Japan when it first started. It's against its rivals of the Sega Saturn and the Nintendo SNES. It did very well, but it didn't quite beat those two big dogs in the gaming market. But we have to go even further back than that to find out the origin of the PlayStation 1. We're talking the early 1990s here. Now, during the early 1990s and probably the late 80s as well, two major CD companies were at large, Philips and Sony. Now, Sony wanted to venture into the gaming market and decided to contact Nintendo about making a Super Nintendo Entertainment System CD. Now, for those who know about the SNES, the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, they used cartridges. Well, Sony at the time wanted to change that into CDs. So Nintendo agreed and they became a collaboration. However, a couple of years in, they couldn't agree on terms and conditions and the pact split, causing Sony to go alone in the gaming market. Now this solo venture into the gaming market was a big step for Sony and they employed a guy named Ken. Now I won't pronounce his last name, but I will put an image of him on the screen and his full name because trying to say his full name is probably just completely incorrect. So Ken designed the PlayStation 1 and released it to the market, and it became very successful in Japan. Ken is now dubbed the father of PlayStation, and he has been since the beginning, since the release of the PlayStation 1. Now the PlayStation 1 was the first of the Sony branding, obviously being the PlayStation 1. It did compete well in 1994, it was a hit, but it wasn't as successful as its rivals of Nintendo Entertainment System and the Sega Saturn. Now, it did compete well. It came third place in the scales and the rankings and the selling, but in 1995 is when it really took off. When it entered the European market, it sold 2.9 million items in its first year alone, compared to Sega Saturn's 1.2 million, which is an astonishing number seen as a brand new company venture into the console industry. In 2005, it had sold 100 million consoles worldwide. 100 million. Bearing in mind, during that time period, we had the release of the PlayStation 2, the GameCube, and the original Xbox. Outstanding figures for a console from a company that had never been in the gaming market before. The PlayStation 1 was created during a time where technology was accelerating in performance. In 1995, computer hardware had increased rapidly compared to the previous years. The hardware for the PS1 was one of the main selling points of the console. Now, the hardware that this PS1 has in it is as follows. The CPU was an LSI core wave processor, which produced 33.86 Hz of processing power at a bandwidth of 132 megabits per second, 4 kilobytes of RAM cache. It also had something called a GTE, which is based in Sony's GPU section of this motherboard. The GTE is a geometry transformation engine. The GTE computes mathematical equations for the 3D graphics, for the geometry and the polygons used within the Sony's GPU to create the images we see on screen. It does this at a high speed of 66 MIPs. Now, depending on the graphics, the GTE within the CPU can produce 360,000 polygons a second. Now, the memory inside the PlayStation 1 is situated in the bottom right hand section of this image, EOD DRAM, shows that the memory within the PlayStation 1 is 2 megabytes of RAM. They also had external memory drives, known as the memory cards, that could hold 128 kilobytes. Now, to think back in the day when I was playing on my PlayStation 1, that those cards could hold upwards of 30 games easily. Today's games are in gigabytes, and they are 64, 128. My PC can only hold 4 or 5 on a terabyte hard drive, and that used to be able to hold 30 games on 128 kilobyte. Now, the Sony GPU is also in the system, as shown right in the middle there, next to the 512 kilobyte VRAM. This had 1 megabyte of VRAM storage, as you can see next to it, and it had 2 kilobytes worth of text to cache. It also had 64 bytes of first in, first out buffer, which meant that the images came through nicely and they were quick, and it also produced images that would reach 640 by 240 pixels. This GPU would also make sure that the images shown on screen could have 16 million plus different colours on the 24-bit and above games. Another major component to the PlayStation 1 was the CD-ROMs. Now, the PlayStation 1 was one of the first consoles to use CD-ROMs, and Sega Saturn was one of the others. Now, during the time, cartridges ruled the gaming world. The likes of Sega, Nintendo, Atari all used cartridges. Now, I think the last company to use a cartridge until recent times was Nintendo, where they released a CD GameCube. They stayed with CDs all the way through until the recent release of the Nintendo Switch. CDs also increased the difficulty of being able to copy the games compared to a cartridge system. This means that PS exclusives could be released by Sony at such an early stage in the game. The CD was also new technology in the gaming industry, which would give fans that little feeling of superiority compared to their mate who had a cartridge. Now, CDs were more expensive to make than cartridges, I believe. However, Sony were a large manufacturer of CDs already, so therefore they cut their production costs quite a bit by using their own CDs, increasing profits and incurring more sales towards Sony and the PlayStation 1. Now, as I discussed earlier, the CDs were able to hold more memory on them, which made games larger and gave PlayStation the chance to use their 3D software and polygon systems to make three-dimensional games. Now, this unique selling point of using the CDs gave Sony an upper hand advantage within the market. This upper hand advantage gave Sony the opportunity to make exclusive games just for their PlayStation unit. Now, according to some web pages, there were 446 different games that were exclusive to PlayStation 1. Some of these are now cross-platform games and are situated across Xbox, PlayStation and PC. However, PlayStation did release some absolute bangers of games across their PS1 time period. These games included Crash Bandicoot, Duke Nukem, the NBA and the NFL games were situated on just PlayStation alone, Spider-Man, Gran Turismo and games such as Driver. Apart from these exclusives, PlayStation had a wide range of other games available to their system, such as Final Fantasy, Tomb Raider, Abe's Oddworld, Ridge Racer, and the list goes on. All these games were very important for the success of PlayStation 1, and some of these games have now cemented themselves in as PlayStation classics and just real nostalgic games to play. And as they say, all good things must come to an end. The PlayStation 1 brought us a range of new games, new views, new sights, and it's just become very nostalgic for us, not to think about the amount of countless hours we've wasted playing the console. In the year 2000, the PlayStation 2 was released, and the PlayStation 1 became its predecessor. But that didn't stop the PlayStation 1. It reached 100 million copies sold in 2005 and was unfortunately discontinued from the Sony PlayStation line in 2006, 11 years after its release. What a story, what a great console it was. So there you have it, a little video on the history, the hardware, the games, and the end of the PlayStation 1 console. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please consider hitting the like and subscribe button. That would mean a lot to me, and I hope to see you guys again in the future.